This section will review writing measurable annual goals for your student's IEP. So the measurable annual goals are statements of anticipated results to be achieved in a calendar year or less, as determined by the Admissions and Release Committee. The annual goals should be directly related to your student's disability, and they pertain to the needs described in the present levels. So that PLAAFP must directly link to those measurable annual goals. So you're specifically going to look at that baseline data that you've collected for that student and write the goals to connect with those. The annual goal focuses on bridging the gap from where your student is now. So you're using that, again, that baseline data in your present level of performance to where your student needs to be related to those pre-Kentucky early childhood standards or appropriate functional skills that a child of that age should have. So when you write the annual goals, you're going to, again, identify that baseline data that connects to the Kentucky Early Childhood Standards or expected functional abilities for the student. You'll prioritize those skill levels, so you want to choose a skill that would be the most appropriate to elevate the student or move him toward those outcomes that you expect him or her to obtain. And then you'll write those measurable annual goals to address the prioritized areas. So some students will have a lot of needs, so you really want to just prioritize what you think is the first thing you need to address. Goals for students in Kentucky must include first the audience, which is the student's name, the behavior that you expect to see the student exhibiting, circumstances under which that behavior will be exhibited, the degree or criterion to which you expect that to happen. Then you need to include also how you're going to measure that behavior and how often you're going to collect data related to that behavior. So here's an example. During daily activities such as small group circles and snack or mealtime, Jamie will maintain a sitting position without assistance or supports for at least 5 minutes, twice daily for 4 consecutive days, as measured daily by duration recording. So in this example, Jamie is the audience. The behavior we want to see is that she maintains a sitting position. The circumstances under which she will exhibit that behavior is during daily activities, and we've provided examples there such as small group, circle, snack, or mealtime. The degree to which we expect her to be able to do that is without assistance or supports, 5 minutes twice daily. We're going to collect that using duration recording measurement method, and we're going to do that daily. So every measurable annual goal must contain all of these components. So again, I was saying earlier that we need to prioritize those skill areas. So when you're thinking about that, you really want to think about what skill the student needs to improve first so that they can access and progress in appropriate activities. So the most important skill the student needs. So, and you also want to think about what is the most modifiable. So what would be really the easiest one to achieve first. And also think about the parent interests. What are some things that the family is really interested in working on, because you'll get more buy-in, of course, from the family, and they are part of the IEP team. So this is just from the compliance record review document from the Kentucky Department of Education that explains that what they want to see in that measurable annual goal are all of those components that we have looked at and discussed. Benchmarks or short-term objectives are not required by Kentucky state law or by federal law. However, some districts do require that benchmarks or short-term objectives be written into the IEP. So check your district policy. Some districts will require you to do that and others will not. So just make sure you're doing what your district is asking you to do in relation to those benchmarks or short-term objectives. So if you are required to write benchmarks, if your district does require benchmarks or objectives be written into the IEP, those benchmarks or objectives must contain those A, B, C, D, E, F components that we talked about that are in the goal. So not only do your annual measurable goals have to have all of those components, so do your benchmarks or objectives. They must relate directly to the annual measurable goal, and they must provide a means to measure progress toward that goal. So basically, you're breaking down that annual measurable goal into smaller steps so that you can more easily measure progress over time. It doesn't have to address every skill or increment of instruction, so you decide how you want to break those down. And there's no minimum number required. Most people write 4, so they would have 1 for every 9 weeks, every grading period, so they could report progress that way. And the only time that state or federal law requires benchmarks or objectives is if a student is on alternate assessment. Preschool students are never on alternate assessment, so it would never be required for preschool students by state or federal law, only by district. So again, make sure, check with your district to see if these are required. If you are required to construct benchmarks or short-term objectives, you can do those in different ways. So you might want to think about them as subcomponents of the whole. So maybe you're doing a task analysis and breaking down the measurable annual goal into steps. You might want to just increase the level of mastery. So, for example, when we looked at Jamie earlier, we want her to be able to sit for 5 minutes. So we might start with 1 minute, then 2 minutes, then 3 minutes, so building up to that 5. You might change the complexity of the circumstances. So with Jamie, we might start with her sitting in a chair, for example, at mealtime, and move to her being able to sit on the floor independently. That would be a more difficult skill. Or if we're providing supports, we could be fading those supports. So again, thinking about Jamie, we said we could start with providing physical support, which would be the most restrictive or highest level of support, and we might decrease that over time to verbal support, reminding her to remember to sit up. So you can think about it in different ways. So here's an example. Again, the example of Jamie during daily activities. Jamie will maintain a sitting position without assistance for at least 5 minutes twice daily for 4 consecutive days, as measured by duration recording. So we might, as I said earlier, we might break that down for Jamie and in minutes. So she'll maintain a sitting position without assistance or supports for 3 minutes, and then build up to that 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Or again, you could break that down into providing more assistance. We might provide full physical assistance in the beginning and remove that support as we move forward. Okay, so that concludes my discussion of measurable annual goals. The next section that we'll review is methods of measurement. So the next section will look at what types of measurement you can use when you're writing those annual goals and how you're going to collect that data and report that progress.